What's going on, everybody? Welcome in. It's the Wager Alarm live stream. I'm your host, Howard Bender. With me, of course, Craig Mish. What's going on, Craig? It's getting to be that time again.
We're getting closer and closer. College football, a couple of weeks away. 2 games, Arizona and Hawaii, and then, of course, Florida and Miami. So those will be 2 games that we'll be watching 2 weeks from tomorrow. And then the full college slate, I guess they call it week 1, starts after that. But look, we're at the stage now, Howard, where we're kind of close enough to where the teams are having their real practices. They're a couple of weeks away from games. And I think that for me, there's always value in kind of putting your money on things early. I get that. I am more of a creature of habit just based on the way that I do things. And the last thing that I want to do in any kind of wagering or any kind of fantasy is to have a key injury affect my money. You know, I would rather wait. That's just the way that I am. And yeah, look, you could get value on a Heisman Trophy winner, or you could take a team and get better odds maybe 2 months ago in college football than you could now. But conversely, you could also have a player get hurt in a practice and then lose the guy for the year, as you illustrated with Central Florida. They lost Mack, their quarterback. And that's not to say that Mack would have been the starter. It could have been Wimbush. But look, that certainly changes the odds. And anything can happen over the next couple of weeks. And by the way, a player could get hurt in the first week of the NFL or college football too. But I would like to have as much data, as much information, and as many practice reports as I can about these teams before I do it. And so tonight here on our live stream, the Power 5 conferences is basically what a lot of people like to talk about, and they like to look at. So we'll go through some of the opportunities that I think that you can get involved in college football of teams to win those conferences. And then you and I will make our pick for the Heisman Trophy winner as well afterward. Also keep in mind when we get to the Heisman Trophy, I love saying it because it just last year was just incredible to think that Kyler Murray, number 1 overall pick in the draft, all the talk about him maybe playing baseball or football was nowhere on the grid for the Heisman Trophy going into the season. Very quickly into the season he was, and all of a sudden he popped up at I think 18-1 and then 10-1 and 12-1. There were still a lot of guys ahead of him. But in the end, Kyler Murray ends up winning it. So I guess, Howard, will find out this year if someone on our Heisman Trophy list with long odds ends up winning the Heisman. I don't think so.
I was just going to ask you if you had perhaps maybe a dark horse candidate you were going to throw our way when we start talking about the Heisman Trophy winners and where we want to lay down some money there. But just think it over. You don't have to. I'm just saying maybe you might. In the meantime, if you guys missed the last live stream that Craig and I did, we went over some wins totals for a number of different programs, some over-unders. So you can go and you can check that out. It's on Wager Alarm. It's on the YouTube page. You can find it on Twitter as well, and you can go back. What we're going to do tonight is, like Craig said, we're going to talk about the big conferences. We're going to talk about who we think the conference champions from our standpoint right now, where we want to lay it down. We're not saying necessarily that this is the team that's going to win as much as it is. This is the bet you probably want to make, or this is what you might want to be looking at for there. And then we'll talk about the Heisman Trophy potential there, and just throw all our money on Trevor Lawrence because that's what everybody's going to do, right?
That's why it makes. I'll tell you, this year in particular. Last year, there really wasn't a clear-cut Heisman Trophy winner at the beginning of the year. That's not making any excuses, but I will say this. Going into the season this year, it's very rare that you'll have a Heisman Trophy competition going into the season where you have two players that are such heavy favorites in this. It couldn't be one, and then someone could come out of nowhere and surprise, but you literally have 2 players, one at Clemson, one at Alabama, both quarterbacks who are just heavy favorites to win. So all of the other players, if somebody else wins outside of those 2, it's almost like the Kentucky Derby where you have 2 big favorites going into the race and then someone comes out of nowhere to win. That could happen this year, and it's happened in the past, but I don't think so this year. I think it ends up being chalk. I think one of those 2 ends up winning it, but when we get there, I'll give you a long shot.
All right, I love it. Absolutely love it. All right, let's go start off with the conferences here. Why don't we kick it off with the Big 12? How about that? Sure. Oklahoma, Texas. Let me just give you the obviously the favorite here is Oklahoma. I'm looking at it right now. They're a minus 140 money line. After that, you've got Texas at plus 300, and then And then it just gets all sorts of, long shotty. Iowa State, Oklahoma State, TCU. You got K-State that falls in there, and then you've got Kansas and Baylor. Finally, Texas Tech picking up the rear. Oh, no, West Virginia is actually picking up the rear here.
Yeah, West Virginia coaching change. Kansas, no chance.
Texas Tech, they lost, they fired their coach, and he's now a big NFL star. And
yeah, this is one of those conferences that I don't think that there's a ton of value here. We kind of go through it. Oklahoma, as a lot of people know, had the great year last year with Murray, and then went right back into the college football transfer portal and grabbed Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts, of course, was the quarterback for Alabama in 2 years ago and last year too, and then Tua Tagovailoa ended up taking over for him. So Alabama, they say goodbye to Jalen Hurts. He takes over now as the Sooners quarterback, which is super interesting, of course, going into the season, because who knows what kind of year that he could have. It's certainly possible. Look, he's not as good as Kyler Murray. There's no chance of that, and he doesn't run anywhere near the way that Kyler Murray ran, too. People look at Jalen Hurts and think he's running all over the place. He's really not. The Sooners, in terms of their tough games this year, them being a -140, they're kind of the reason why is because the way the schedule works for them this year, all their really tough games are at home. So with the exception of playing Texas, which is always a good matchup in the Red River rivalry, they'll play that game at the Cotton Bowl, but it's a rivalry game, and it's usually split 50-50 in terms of fans. They show up from both sides there. So that's not really, even though the game is in Texas, it's really not a home game. Not a road game, them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the better team is Oklahoma, but Texas could win that one, and that could change things. But if they get past Texas, there's really nothing formidable. They go on the road, they'll face Oklahoma State. I'm not sure how good Oklahoma State will be this season. They open up with Houston, and Houston has a pretty solid defense, and maybe that's the game that they get caught off guard right out of the box. Maybe that's the best chance of Oklahoma losing, but I don't think so. I do think they roll all the way through the end of the season, and then who knows what could happen at the end. They could certainly lose their conference championship game, but they are -140. So the recommendation, unfortunately, probably would be to just take Oklahoma in the spot, Howard. I don't see any way.
Which is not even a good bet. The money line.
It really isn't, and you got to roll the whole entire year waiting just to cash in on a -140 at the end. It's not even worth it. So finding a long shot here, TCU would be a team I'd look at. They're 18-1. They have, and again, not a good matchup to have to go on the road and play Oklahoma. But guess what, Howard? They play Oklahoma. So if somehow TCU was able to, if I'm going to take a long shot, give me the team at least that's going to play against the favorite, right?
Right.
So they play Oklahoma on the road. That's not a good game for them for TCU, but at least they get the heads-up matchup there. They had a lot of injuries, TCU, in the spring. They didn't even play a spring game. That's how banged up they were. That's not a good sign either. But I will tell you this, and I've said this before. I've told sells this too, and anybody that will listen. To me, TCU has the best wide receiver in the country. In reality and fantasy, we'll be talking about him next year. He'll be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. Jalen Reagor. He is fantastic. He is awesome. He doesn't fit the mold of like a Julio Jones type where he's like 6'5". He's more of the, I guess, Antonio Brown type. I think that would be
bad
more
comp. Bad comp. Yeah, pick any other comp than that right now.
Calvin Ridley, and put him on the other side. And a guy who returns kicks, he returns punts, he does it all. He rolled off so many touchdowns for TCU last year. He was the only one who was scoring for them for a while. TCU in the past, 11 wins, 10 wins, 10 wins, and then last year down to 7. If I had to throw a long shot out there, if I was going to do it, it would be TCU at 18-1 for those factors listed. And for those of you who are doing this and maybe you're thinking about going in on college football conference championships, if you're going to do it, make sure the team that you're taking has a chance to play the top team that's favored in this thing. Because if they don't, you're completely from behind. You almost have no chance, even if your team does really well and they don't end up playing the team. So give yourself a chance at least to get to the championship game, and then think about TCU. If they were able to run the table and they were able to beat Oklahoma, and then you have them in an 18-1 shot, at least you could hedge in the championship. And if you put $10 down, hypothetically, to win 180, and then you bet 90 on the other side, you turn $10 into 90. That's 9 times your investment. So that's one way to look at it. But certainly, I don't I don't think TCU wins the championship, but at least that's a long shot for me there.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like anything I want to move in on. I'd rather let's just move to a different conference here. I'm not gonna sit here and try and dig out anything. You can't get blood from a stone, Craig.
Not in that conference. Not in that one.
Let's move on to the Pac-12 then.
This is more interesting. Yeah, this is more interesting.
It really is, actually, because you've got Washington, Oregon, and Utah all the same money line for them, plus 3 to end up winning this one. Mm-hmm. Washington State, USC, they're close behind there at plus 1,000. You've got Stanford in there. Oh, UCLA at plus 16 also. So I mean, it's definitely a lot closer together than it is over in the Big 12. So you going with one of the favorites here: Oregon, Washington, Utah.
Yeah, I think so, but it's wide open. That's what tells you that it is wide. You have 3 teams that are the favorite, not 2. And I think that by the time the college football season starts, I think Utah will end up having the most money on them. They are the darling this year of college football, and a lot of people like them. But you know what, Howard? It's been a while since Utah has been this good to be in this spot, and I don't know how they'll respond to that. So that's not the team that I'm going to take to pick. I'll go back to Oregon here. As we talked about in our previous live stream, to me, they have the great quarterback in Herbert. They have the great offensive line. You may wonder, well, what is it about Utah this season? For people who don't watch a lot of college football, all of a sudden Utah's at it. Well, their defense is phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, they're the number 1 defense against the run, number 2 defense last year against the pass, and they're getting virtually everybody back. In fact, Utah had a lot of players that went in the NFL draft, but they even had more who they go through that process, Howard, where they get checked to see where they're going to end up going. And they looked at it and thought, okay, well, I'm a 4th, 5th round pick. If I stay in another year, maybe I could go higher. And that's the case with their running back, Zach Moss. He was one of the top 5 running backs in the country last year. And even their quarterback, Tyler Huntley, in October, he was 4-0. He got hurt. That changed the dynamic of that team. So, look, Utah certainly has the right to be up there. But I am going to take Oregon in this spot. I think they have the better quarterback. They have the better offensive line. Maybe not as good as defense, but if these 2 teams end up playing, hopefully it would be Oregon's offense to outdo Utah's defense. And by the way, Washington is there virtually every single year. They have a great program, but I think they're on this a little bit in name only. I don't think they'll be as good as some people think they will. In terms of long shots here, look, Arizona State would be one. They have a very tough schedule. They're 40-1. They got to go to Michigan State. They got to go to Utah. It's almost impossible to think that they're going to win both of those, especially an out-of-conference game at Michigan State. But look, Herm Edwards got off to a really good start last year, and then the team fell apart. The one thing I will say is, again, if Utah is so good, Howard, and Arizona State somehow is able to go to Utah and win, that gives you a little bit of an advantage there. I think that number is a little too high at 40-1. I think it should be like 20, 25-1. So that would be my long shot at 40-1, and I'll pick Oregon to win the Pac-12.
Okay, I can dig that. I can dig it. Let's keep rolling then. And where do you want to go here? Let's I'll tell you what. No, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there either. Let's do the Big Ten. Let's do the Big Ten. Okay. Why not?
All right. Well,
Michigan and Ohio State.
Every year, same thing, right?
Always.
Pretty much. Every once in a while, you'll mix in a Penn State or a Michigan State. You know, it's not impossible, but it just kind of does feel like, with them being co-favorites this year at plus 180. So not a ton of value on either of those 2 teams. Nebraska's 10-1. A lot of people love Nebraska this year. I'm not really sure why, but they think that in his second year of head coach at Nebraska, they think Scott Frost is going to end up, bringing that team back. We'll see. Penn State's supposed to take a little bit of a step back this season, at least according to how most people feel about them. So, look, Ohio State is probably going to do what they do every year, Howard, which is go undefeated all the way up until the end. They never play a fantastic schedule, and that's the case again this year. They don't have really any tough out-of-conference game the way I see it. So it'll probably be the toughest game of the year. They'll have to go to Michigan and beat Michigan. But guess what?
They're 4-0 against Harbaugh.
Jim Harbaugh can't win. He can't beat Ohio State.
Such an anti-Harbaugh guy that to see him continuously struggle in. I mean, let's face it. You go 0-5 against Ohio State.
I think he's done.
Everybody's they're like, he's gone.
I think he's done.
Win that game. Yeah. That's the game you got to win.
This is it, and they're at home. So I think he is on the hot seat a little bit. Maybe he returns to the NFL. We'll see. But 0-5 is the end, Howard, I think, for him there. Ohio State last year, they had Dwayne Haskins. Of course, he's on the Redskins now. Bosa's in the NFL. They got a transfer from Georgia, Justin Fields. If you're looking at the Heisman Trophy odds this year, Fields is close to the top. Why? Because he was a phenomenal recruit there, but he wants to play, and he's not going to have an opportunity to play this year behind Jake Fromm at Georgia. So Fields will have an opportunity to play. I think it's Michigan, Ohio State in the end. It's probably the winner of that game getting there. And look, even with a new coach this year with Ohio State, until Michigan beats Ohio State, I can't. You got to let the trend be your friend. So I'll take Ohio State here at plus 180 to win the Big Ten. Long shot, Purdue's 30-1. Here's the good news for them in the regular season. So this is how we would have to play this. So Purdue does not play Ohio State or Michigan. Okay, so that goes against the theory that I gave you before. Right. They have a tough game against TCU. They'll have to beat Penn State, but they play in the opposite division of Ohio State and Michigan. So here's the scenario that could play itself out. Ohio State runs the table. They crush Michigan. They play Penn State in the they play Purdue, and you have Purdue at 30-1, and they play them in the championship. Well, we know Ohio State's going to be like 30-point favorites. Right. So what you would have to do is take basically all the winnings that you would have made with Purdue, end up winning the Big Ten because they're not going to do it, and then you would take the money line of Ohio State against them. Now, the risk to win would be almost ridiculous, but that would be the ultimate hedge at that point. If Purdue could just get to the championship game, you would have to take the other side to hedge your bet on whatever that would be, because I would think that they would be a monster underdog going into that game. But that was really the only team that I could see even having a chance. But I got to tell you, odds are Purdue's going to lose a couple games before then.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move on then to the SEC. Bama, obviously.
All right, thanks for joining us, Howard. See you later. Been fun. Have a great night.
I'm out of here, guys. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
All right, Alabama. That's it. Goodbye. Well, look, let's try and take somebody else here. Let's take LSU or somebody. Let's give it a shot, right?
Really?
Right. I mean, look, LSU. I mean, they're the only team I could see. I mean, there's a chance there.
More than Georgia?
I think so. Look, LSU, think about it. LSU beats Alabama. LSU plays Georgia in the championship. LSU beats Georgia. LSU wins the SEC. I mean, they have the clear path to do it. They're 14-1, so I would take a shot on that. They have a returning quarterback in Joe Burrow. He's probably LSU's best quarterback since Jamarcus Russell. Don't laugh. Okay. Zach Mettenberger, they had him, Matt Mock. LSU has not done a great job with their quarterbacks. They're kind of known more for their running backs and their defense. But they have a new coach on offense this year that's going to help their offensive coordinator. They're going to do some more passing, they're saying. LSU has Florida at home, Auburn at home. So maybe they win both of those two. You don't know. But inevitably, Howard, they got to go to Alabama, and they got to win for this to happen. That's why they're 14-1. And that's why Alabama's the favorite. If the game was in LSU, it'd be a little bit different. Alabama wouldn't be as much of an overwhelming favorite, and you wouldn't be able to get LSU at 14-1. They'd be like 10 or 12-1. So Alabama minus 150, they're the favorite. I mean, you can't really make a case for any other team. They're bringing back so many great players this year. Jerry Jeudy, I think, Jerry Jeudy will be the best wide receiver in the country with a chance to win the Heisman with as many touchdowns he's going to catch from Tua. Or I would go LSU at 14-1. I don't see it any other way. And I think Georgia will slip up at some point. Remember, they also have a tough schedule. They got to play Florida at a neutral site also. I know the Gators inside and out. I don't think the Gators could win 8 or 9 games. They're not going to win the SEC. So, I hate to go chalk with all of these, and some of them were plus money. Oregon is plus money. Ohio State's a little bit of plus money. What I would do with the SEC is I just wouldn't take Alabama. It would take LSU or nothing. That's the way that I would go with it. And that kind of closes that out. And unfortunately, as we move toward the ACC,
it's the same thing.
It is the same thing. I mean, there are powerhouses right now in college football, and there's just no other way to look at it. And I think maybe more so, Howard, honestly, in the ACC than any other conference. Like, I mean, Clemson should be in another conference, honestly. Like, they are so far above everyone else to me that no one else comes close, and the odds represent that.
They definitely represent that. I mean, they're minus 400 here, and then
what's the point of that?
right?
No,
is,
no
is
point at all.
is 16-1 Miami. I said no. I mean, listen, I think that's
Miami's going to lose the first game of the year.
All right. Well, I mean, listen, you know what? Some of these conferences you don't want to bet. I get it.
No, you just don't do it. You don't do and you definitely don't do minus 400. I mean, that's a terrible.
What's the point of that?
You do a minus 400, you got to wait 12 games to see if you won. It makes no sense.
Right. No. And what are you risking to actually, for a minus 400?
400 to win $100 and waiting the whole year for that?
No, thank you.
No value.
No, thank you. All right. So we can push the ACC aside. We can push the SEC aside. I like where we're at with the Big 10, Big 12, and the Pac-12. That's actually really nice. Those are some decent ones there. Like even your long shots are at least worth the effort. Like that's
LSU would be the one that I would say gives you the best possibility.
Yeah, and I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to mess. I'm just not going to mess against Alabama and Clemson. I mean,
it's hard to make a case. Look, I would love to be able to make a case, but again, in a couple of these, at the very least, you're getting that head-to-head matchup. So, like, let's say you put $100 on LSU, okay? And then in October, they play Alabama. They're both undefeated. Howard Bender's in the shed. There's the game. Game's on. You got to right there, Howard. If they beat Alabama in this game, let's say I haven't taken a look because they have the spread already, like the projected spread of what it would be. Let's say hypothetically Alabama against LSU, let's say they're 13 or 14. That sounds probably about right. They were bigger favorites, I think, last year. They were like 20. But going into that game, okay, this is it. This is a huge odds game. If I win this, then I could go to even on one of those websites and turn in my futures ticket and get paid off less money. There's sites that do that now where they'll buy your futures ticket from you and take that, and you don't get as much money, but they have it out there. So I think there's some intrigue there, but I couldn't tell you to take Arizona State. I couldn't tell you to take Purdue. I'm just trying to find value on odds that I think are a little bit too high. Like Arizona State 40-1 to win the Pac-12. I could see them at 25-30. TCU at 18-1. I think it should be a little bit lower, 12, 13, 15-1. And the other ones we didn't pick favorites.
What kills me is that those are better odds to win their conferences than like Virginia Tech and Syracuse have to win in the ACC. Like, I mean, what is that? 20-1 right there. Come on.
No, forget it. Just ignore that. Yeah. Look, there's going to be a game on Clemson's schedule that they're going to struggle. It'll be the fourth quarter. The game will be tied. It's going to happen. It happens every year. And that team that you could have on the other side could beat them. But Howard, is that team, let's say you take Virginia Tech. Okay, great. Is Virginia Tech undefeated at that point? They may have lost all their games up until that point, and it won't even matter to you if you took Virginia Tech because they're 0-3. I'm done. They're not winning the conference. But great, but fantastic. They ended up beating Clemson. What does it really mean?
Which just ruins this ticket here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for that.
Way to go, Hokies. Thanks a lot. All right, well then let's push the conferences aside here. Let's talk Heisman Trophy.
All right.
Favorites here, obviously, it's the quarterbacks. It's Lawrence. It's Tagovailoa.
Tua
Tagovailoa. I don't know how to pronounce.
So historically speaking, is there any chance anybody outside of a quarterback wins the Heisman Trophy this year? Probably not.
Probably not. Well, didn't you sent me a sheet that had, what was it, over the last, how many Heisman Trophy winners? You had like 2 running backs and everybody else was a quarterback?
Yeah, Kyler Murray.
Since 2000.
Yeah, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Mark Ingram both won Heismans at Alabama, and they were running backs. But everybody else has been a quarterback. Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, you can keep going back there. So the odds are is a quarterback is going to win this thing. And so the question is, would you go because there's a little value there on taking a 3-1. So is it Tua or is it Trevor Lawrence? And that's why you have the value there of trying to figure out who that's going to end up being. For me, if I had to go with a long shot here, I've been so much discussing Oregon. Why not take Justin Herbert?
20-1? Sure.
Why not take? I mean, I think talent-wise, he's up there with these other 2 quarterbacks. So that certainly could be a possibility. And remember, there's no, like in baseball, Howard, there's no WAR. There's no advanced metrics on how they vote for the Heisman. And let's say, hypothetically, Ohio State's undefeated in the entire season. And this kid, Justin Fields, we don't know anything about him, honestly. Like, this is a transfer from Georgia with no college football experience whatsoever. Who's to say that Justin Fields isn't better than these other two guys? Did we go into last year? Did anybody talk about Trevor Lawrence being the Heisman Trophy winner this year?
Well,
did anybody even mention his name? Kelly Bryant was the guy for Clemson last year. Now he's in Missouri. So I definitely wouldn't take Tua or Trevor Lawrence. I wouldn't do it. I would go outside the box here. I would throw a little bit on Herbert, a little bit on Justin Fields. That's the way I would go. I would not pick Jalen Hurts to win the Heisman Trophy. Adrian Martinez somehow is 10-1. I mean, I know he had a great year last year, but everything has to go right for Nebraska to end up winning, and that's kind of where I would stop with the Heisman. But I mean, for fun, we certainly could look at other guys and perhaps pick other guys, but I don't think that I would have interest in doing that.
Well, why don't you pull out the shovel? Why don't you dig super deep right now, and why don't you tell me who out there is not listed right now as far as the odds go that you might possibly.
Well, Moss, the running back on Utah, Jalen Rieger on TCU. Those would be two guys that if I had to dig, I would. But again, those are two non-quarterbacks at this point. And look, I mean, even with the season 2 years ago, Howard, that Saquon Barkley had, could he have had a better season? He didn't win the Heisman either. So it just seems like they're just heading in this direction of just constantly giving it to the quarterbacks. No matter how good anybody is on defense, they ain't winning. Like, there's no Charles Woodson. It's just not happening anymore.
That's what the Biletnikoff Award is for, okay?
Exactly. So I'll basically, those are the two other names of just players that are long shots for me. But I would try Justin Herbert. That's who I would try. That's the guy that, I think that he should be a lot higher than 25-1. And he doesn't have the receivers also that Alabama has. There's no doubt. Travis Etienne, the running back for Clemson. I mean, he's not even in the stratosphere here because Trevor Lawrence is on the same team, and Clemson has some players around Trevor Lawrence too. But Herbert, if he's healthy and throws for 40 touchdowns and he stays upright all season long, I could see him being in this conversation. So Heisman's not always that easy to handicap, but the good news here in this one is because of Murray coming out of nowhere to win last year, there's no clear-cut favorite this year, as you could see. Getting 3-1 odds on Trevor Lawrence seems pretty juicy right now. Like, if he has a really good year, he could end up winning it, but doesn't always fall that way. So Herbert for me first, and then after that, I would take a shot with Fields just because he's an unknown quantity. And then if I had to pick between Tua or Trevor Lawrence, I'd pick Trevor Lawrence.
Okay. Yeah, listen, I'm fine with that. I'm wondering what the odds would be on a guy like Moss or Rieger right now.
Like, they would be like the field types. So you'd get a 20-1, 25-1, something like that.
Man, it's not worth it for me.
No.
I'll stick with the quarterbacks. All right, well, there we go. So top conferences out there, Heisman Trophy possibilities here. I think that's going to do it for us here today at the Wager Alarm live stream. Now, again, next week, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into some NFL stuff. We're going to be talking wins totals, AFC and NFC.
Yeah.
And I think the week after that, well, then we're going to start making our picks for college.
Right.
And then later on in the week, I think what we're going to end up doing is come up with some prop bets for the NFL season.
Yeah, I think Tuesday AFC win totals of next week. Friday NFC win totals. The following Tuesday, we'll do the early lines on the two college football games. The game between Florida and Miami and the game between Arizona and Hawaii, because those are the two games coming up on Saturday. On Friday, we'll have at least one college pick of those two games. And then we'll also wrap up some of the NFL futures. And by the way, the player props in the NFL all come out next week too. So we'll have opportunities to do that. And then the following week we come back, we have the full slate of college football at that point. It'll be week 1. So we'll be participating, I know, in the contest also in college as well as pro this year. We'll make our picks for that. And of course, each week here on Wager Alarm, here's what you can expect. If there is a full slate of games, Howard and I will always have in the NFL Super Contest our 5 picks. And in college football, depending on which contest we join, we'll always have a minimum of 3 picks in college football. So every week that you tune in here on Friday before the Saturday and Sunday games, you'll always have a minimum of 8 picks from us. And that seems to be that's a high number to bet on unless you have a monster bankroll each week. But at least it gives you an idea as to what we're thinking. And based on the results last year, both college and pro, I don't watch all college football and pro football live streams in terms of wagering across the country, so I can't speak for everybody else, but I was very happy with our results last year.
As was I. No doubt about it. All right. Well, there you go, guys. Tune in next week on Tuesday for Craig and I. We do our AFC wins totals over there. Big thanks to Matt Sells for producing everything. Big thanks to you, as always, Craig, for just
Thanks
being
for having
you.
me. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend, Howard. Thanks for having me again.
You as well. You have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. For Craig, I'm Howard. This has been the Wager Alarm live stream, and we'll catch you next time.